Our sponsor for this session is Panther Fluids, drilling fluid systems designed for your operation. Please visit their page in our Sponsor Showcase tab.
Welcome back. We'll hear now from Tyler Harris, CFO of longtime Permian-based Mariah Energy Investments, which has a very exciting development in a hotspot of the Eastern Shelf in which it's deploying unconventional approaches to a conventional rock. Prior, Tyler was with Firewheel Energy, and he was with financial services firms Barclays, B of A, and Lehman. Welcome, Tyler.
Thanks, Nissa. Thanks for having me here on this virtual presentation. Again, and I want to send a special thanks to Hart for putting this stuff on. Again, I was talking to a couple of people earlier of it's really special to have these presentations going on in these hard times. There's so much that's changing in the industry. Things like this help us all keep connected and keep up to speed with what's going on in the industry. So again, really appreciate y'all having me here, but very much appreciate the fact that y'all are putting these types of things on and trying to give us a sense of normalcy as much as we possibly can in these crazy times. So I'll go through a little bit of an overview of Mariah Energy Investments. It would be hard to give you much of a flavor for what Mariah Energy Investments is without giving you some of the background on who Moriah Group is. Moriah Group is the family office for Dale and Carrie Brown. They were the founders of Legacy Reserves, the publicly traded E&P MLP company from back in the day, and formed the family office around the time of Legacy's IPO in 2007. The family office was always intended to be a diversified investment platform, but that largely started off with the real estate group out of the gates in 2007. And are really thankful for what that group has meant for both Moriah Group and really for Mariah Energy Investments. It goes to that quote of, if I can see farther, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. That group has had tremendous success across the real estate platform, multifamily, commercial, and in the brokerage house, and has really set the stage for the culture and the enthusiasm that we have as an entire Moriah Group team. Moriah Group also has a direct investments platform. We invest directly like traditional private equity into oilfield services, industrials, and other applications. We've recently begun a venture into tech. I've also done major motion pictures, so we're a little bit all over the board. And that's led us to Mariah Energy Investments. Previously, while Carrie was employed with Legacy as their CEO, was unable to invest in upstream oil and gas, largely is due to the conflict. He retired as CEO in 2015, which led to Mariah Energy Investments. And our first investment, which was the acquisition of the operated properties from Firewheel Energy, where I was at the time. So in a lot of ways, I came over to Moriah Group as part of that acquisition. Since that time, we've done 4 subsequent oil and gas investments. We have been willing and able to invest across a variety of different types of assets. So we will play the game in a diverse way, in whatever way we feel like is maximizing our return relative to the amount of risk we're taking. I know that sounds a bit Wall Street financial terms, but that's truly how we believe we should invest capital. So I'll give you a little bit of sense on what we have, current assets under management for the Mariah Energy Investments platform. So you can see here, we are geographically diverse, but we're also diverse in terms of the nature of the assets that we have. We have both operated properties and non-operated properties. Of the non-operated properties, we are willing to partner with true joint venture type of a partnership. We're also willing to partner just straight buying AFEs and things like that, in partnering in the more traditional working interest sense. We have taken interest in PDP-only assets. And as I'm getting ready to explain and walk through, we've done acreage and true grassroots development, build it up from scratch. And our ability to do that is largely attributable to the team that we have. So the team that we have is dynamic and capable of both, again, operating and non-operating, of evaluating deals across a wide variety of different investment thesis, and that's really how we like to see the world where we possibly can. So with that, with the the kind of quick 5-minute commercial for Moriah Group and who Mariah Energy Investments is, I'll kind of start walking through what we saw in this particular play in the Strawn Sands, what we call the Camp Springs prospect. So this started in 2015 for us. We saw 3 wells that were initially drilled in Scurry County, kind of in the middle of nowhere, away from what you would really expect to see, or where you would really expect to see a highly prolific well. The 3 wells, the Desi, the Kate, and the Williams, certainly got our attention, specifically the Kate, that made over 1,000 barrels of oil a day for 3 consecutive months. Based on that, there was a strong level of interest from ourselves and from several others in the area. And so we rolled up our sleeves and got to work as fast as we could. This is where serendipity in the oil and gas industry played well for us, and we felt tremendous benefit from this. But having the background we had at Firewheel, which was a Klein Shale Eastern Shelf company focused in Sterling and Mitchell counties, but very much in this area, and having understood what was going on in the Eastern Shelf geologically, and I don't mean just stratigraphy-wise, but also kind of geography-wise and where the trends were migrating to and from, we were able to get a strong understanding of what it was that the Kate, Desi, and Williams had tapped into and where else we might be able to see something similar. So very quickly, we were able to map what we felt like was the rest of the trend. And we largely focused our efforts to the north and the east of the Kate, Desi, and Williams, or that initial development, for 2 reasons. One, again, we felt like they were geologically similar, but also we felt like there wouldn't be as much competition that far away from the proven wells. So we took significant leasehold up there. I'd love to tell you that we were the first ones up there, but we weren't. We were a couple weeks behind another company called Cholla Petroleum, who took leasehold that's fairly intermixed with our own. And from there, we really wanted to evaluate what others were going to be able to do and if the development would migrate to the north and east, if others were going to see the same things we saw. We didn't want to be one of the early pioneers of the play. We really wanted to learn as much as we possibly could before we began putting those development dollars to work. So we started development in late 2018. I think there were 15 subsequent wells that had been drilled between the Kate, Desi, and Williams and our first well, the Tigger 1H. Felt like we learned a lot about what was being done. There were a lot of different techniques applied, most of them successful. I think we saw a high degree of success from other operators in the area, even employing different techniques, which gave us a lot of confidence that we were going to be successful, that there wasn't going to be some magic equation that was going to solve everything for us, that it was very much what you would expect to see in an unconventional play. So with that, we drilled the Tigger in late 2018. The Tigger has cumed over 170,000 barrels in the first 18 months of its life. So we're extremely pleased with that well and its production. It was a great first test for us. We certainly had our share of stumbling blocks along the way as we got there. But again, extremely pleased with that well. At this point, other operators have been able to demonstrate that repeated success throughout this trend, and that's happened both to the north and the east where we are, as well as to the almost due south of those initial wells. So we think that the geology mapping that we put together initially is proven to be accurate, and we've proven that this play is repeatable and highly prolific across a variety of operators and across a variety of areas. We are currently, after the Tigger, we drilled 2 subsequent wells, the Emily 1H, the Emily 2H, that were side by side. Again, 2 more strong results to go along with our first one. Very happy there. We had a rig stood up in March of this year and intended to drill a 3-well package when COVID hit not only us, but all of us here. And we ultimately laid the rig down for the last 2 wells. So we did finish drilling the first of those 3 wells, which is now the J&B 1H, and we are gearing up a completion crew that is actually moving in, probably as I'm giving you this presentation, but as it's aired, will probably be online. So very excited about what that well is going to look like. Certainly expect to be back on the drill bit at some point this year, hopefully late this year, to try to further our progress. Infrastructure has been pretty exciting to watch, especially in the last year or so. And again, just as a reminder of where we are, so we're on the eastern edge of Scurry County, western edge of Fisher County. This is just not a part of the world that the oil field has really seen in much detail before. We are about 10 miles away from Sac Rock, so it's not like it's not in the area at all, but in this part of the world, this much east, it was pretty barren. Previous to the Kate, Destiny, and Williams and the subsequent development that has come from those wells, really a lot of this has been vertical Ellenberger wells, some vertical wells attempting to test this same Strawn Sand, but largely unsuccessful, or wells that would not be economic at any recent commodity price that you could assume. So again, a fairly barren area, and we felt like it was important to have infrastructure in the area in order for this play to be successful. And that's something that it's easy for us to look at the play and say, hey, we think these are 30 to 50% rate of return wells. We think there's a significant amount of inventory available to us. We see a lot of reasons why there should be gas, crude, and SWD infrastructure in the area, but it's not as easy necessarily to convince somebody else to put their dollars to work to build those things for you. So we've been very pleased that those partners have come to this area. We now have a gas system that's online. Producers Midstream has recently put one in and turned on their plant recently. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. Wolf Midstream laid a crude pipeline out here, and we have the Tigger well connected up to that crude pipeline system. We're waiting to see that system expand a little bit further to the east into where we're seeing our development, but pleased that it's made the trip all the way from Colorado City out here. And then we have Pilot Water Solutions that has drilled a couple SWDs out here. We have one of our own, and there are certainly discussions about how we can all work together to make the water infrastructure more cohesive and beneficial for everybody. Again, would highlight producers and the partner they've been to us out here. We started talking to them about 18 months ago about wanting to put a gas system in, and from then to now, it's happened, and they've delivered on everything they've said they would. The plant is online, it's taking our gas and processing it, and we're seeing significant revenue uplift from those operations. So they have been a wonderful partner, not just in getting the gas up and running, but they've been a great sounding board in terms of thinking about the world the same way. Their sponsor, Tailwater, again, has been extremely constructive in working with us on how we can manage a lot of the challenges that we're seeing out there and what we've gone through in the development. So we're very appreciative of them and others for creating the infrastructure to make this play work. And the last thing I'll touch on is just kind of what's next. Well, what's next? A lot is next. Again, this is the far reaches of the eastern shelf, far reaches of the Permian Basin. This isn't Delaware, this isn't Midland. We don't have hundreds of operators trying everything that you could possibly try. And so we're all trying to get up to speed as much as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, especially in this commodity price environment where the revenue is more challenged, the returns are going to be more challenged. There's going to have to be an increased focus on how we're going to reduce costs, maximize efficiency, maximize returns. And what's going on right now are really a lot of things. If you're in the Midland Basin, you're thinking, well, we tackled a lot of that stuff a year ago, or we tackled a lot of that stuff 5 years ago. Well, those problems and those issues are what we're facing today. So spacing. We're trying to test spacing. I don't think we're going to do anything like the Dominator, but we're going to have to figure out how many wells actually fit in a section. Longer laterals. All of our development so far has been mile laterals, but we've seen 1.5 mile laterals get drilled, and very recently, Cholla just drilled a 2 mile lateral. So we know that's possible, and those things that drive efficiencies, drive returns, and ultimately enable you to increase the pace of your development. On top of that, it's going to be things that everybody has faced before. How are we going to reduce D&C, whether that's rig time, whether that's tubulars pricing, things like that. What are we going to do to consolidate facilities? Operationally, we're going to have to figure out how to get our monthly operation costs down, and we're working on that, moving through as much as we possibly can. On the marketing side, again, back to the infrastructure, we've seen a significant improvement in the amount of infrastructure to service, so we're getting off of truck and onto pipe. But the other thing that we've got going for us is we are extremely close to Colorado City, and with the significant amount of volume growth that's expected to come from this play over the coming year or two, we should expect to start realizing some uplift for our barrels as we get more thoughtful about how we're going to move both the barrels and the gas and NGLs onto those pipelines. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and happy to take a few questions.
Thank you, Tyler. Really, really appreciate your presentation. You mentioned Cholla has drilled or is drilling a 2-mile lateral. I'm wondering about the thickness of the zone.
So they've drilled that 2-mile lateral. Actually, it is drilled, completed, and online. They've been flowing it back for about 3 weeks now. So that's in the same Strawn zone, but a little bit further to the south. The thickness down there is fairly comparable to what we have, but geographically it's just not as expansive.
Mm-hmm. So, but there's no issue with staying in zone?
There's not. And I think this is more as an industry than anything else, we've figured out how to navigate a fairly narrow window as we're drilling these wells. I think we target a zone that's about 15 to 20 foot thick in what we're thinking of as 100 to 140 foot intervals. So we're able to nail these things pretty tightly. The other thing I'd add to that is, unlike in some of the other unconventional areas where you might see a significant reduction in your frac height, we're able to frac through almost the entire interval pretty easily without as much pressure or as much sand as you're seeing elsewhere, or prop open the whole thing pretty effectively. So staying in zone isn't as critical. That said, it's not all that difficult either.
Also, we spoke a month or so ago about your work there in the Eastern Shelf. It was quite fascinating. You mentioned that when you were first looking at this play, and there were the 2 wells already out there that you were using to work off of, that your geologist said, "I'd never drill this. Nothing in the logs looks like it ought to be productive." But you drilled it, and it continues to be productive. I'm wondering then, when you're picking another location to place a well, looking at old conventional vertical well logs, you're looking at the same sort of thing where you can't imagine this would be productive, but you drill it and it is.
That's right. And I will say, it's a very disconcerting thing to hear your geologist say, "I would never have thought this was going to be productive," but you can't defeat the well result. That the well is there and it says that it should be. And so one of the key things he was looking at was water saturation, and felt like this would be largely wet, that there just wouldn't be enough oil in place to make the result or results that we've seen. And so what we're looking for now is not so much, can we find something on a log that looks like we ought to want to drill that, as much as, can we find something that looks very similar to either the initial wells that we saw and the control that we had, or similar to what we know is productive in our own wellbores. Obviously now we have more sophisticated logs that have shed light on why these things are as productive as they are. And so we're really looking for similar rock properties as what we've seen in successful wells.
I think too, D&C costs per well currently at the 2020 price is $4.5 million. Is that about correct? Is that with a mile lateral?
That's a mile lateral, and that's what we're seeing that get down to, yes.
In terms of these costs, do you currently have a rig drilling, or you had some ducks before? Are you completing those now?
That's right. So we had 1 duck, and we're completing that again, kind of as we speak. That's ongoing. And we think with current costs, so some of the reason we're at $4.5 million has been the slowdown in activity. And with that slowdown in activity, it's forced, again, the pressures have pushed prices downward. And so we do think that's enabled us to pick up a rig and begin development later this year. Whereas if we were still looking at, 2019 prices, I think we would probably still be on the sidelines.
And then lastly, too, the play itself, the fairway for it is fairly finite. I saw one estimate was 6 miles by 10 miles, 60 square miles or so. I mean, of course, there's potential for, you know, some sort of extraordinary sweet spot to be found elsewhere, even outside the shelf. But pretty much all of the leasehold that has potential for this, I imagine, has been leased. So if anyone else wanted to enter, they would have to simply buy out an existing player.
That's correct. Really, the existing leasehold has been out there and active for 3 years. Most of the leases that, at least the ones that we have looked at, are 3-2, so everybody's hit those 2-year extensions where they haven't had development already. But we have seen a couple acquisitions. We've seen a couple players buy into positions or buy into the play as a means of getting access to the opportunity.
I imagine, too, you're already looking for where else you might be able to find one of these.
We're sure trying.
Thank you, Tyler. Really appreciate it. Thank you.